Testing, testing. Okay, looks like sound is coming through. Hopefully, I'm not muffled.
Hello, hello.
There's Aaron. Let me get my video working here. And there's the other Aaron. That should not lead to any confusion.
I know, right? I should
Michael
have at
Ball and
least
Bruce,
spelled it
Michael Ball and
differently.
Bruce, Michael Ball and Bruce. Do you mind if we
All
call
right.
you Bruce to relieve the confusion?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is nice to see you again, brother.
You too, man. You too. It's been too long. It's been too long, but I'm glad to be here. So,
Me too. It's nice to see everybody who's joined us, and we
uh,
need to keep an eye on that waiting room. I'm terrible about that in my classes,
yeah,
so
I'll try to do that too.
it wouldn't let
Um,
me. I tried to make it without a waiting room, but it requires some form of like one of three forms of security, and the waiting room seemed to be the least invasive. So,
got it, got it.
but
And
yeah,
just as I said to everybody, I have a cup of Joe and a can of water at the same time. So,
I have my coffee, but I've been very bad, and it's already like three quarters gone.
yeah, same here, same here. I need to wake up. So,
But I just wanted to remind everyone that we've done this once before, but
mhm.
I was an idiot and I failed to record it. I thought I had it set up on automatic recording, which I do now. So in fact, I am going to,
Yeah, did it right away.
rather than make myself look foolish, I'm actually going to check and make sure that it does say it's recording. It
It
does.
did
Got
when
the red
I
light.
logged in.
Cool, we're good. So yeah, we are recording this one. So I'll probably put this up on the Doc Souls YouTube channel if you want, or if you
Cool.
have somewhere you want to host it, that's fine too.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, we the last time we met, we talked about spiritual stuff. I thought we could just kind of do the same thing because there's
Mhm.
we give the classes on all the how tos of magic and stuff, but the part that's often gets
Absolutely.
missed is the spiritual side of it, the living it, in your day to day life, and almost the religious side of it. Although I hate to use the word religion because I don't mean going to church religion. I mean
Right.
standing in awe of God religion. Um, but I think before we get started, just because this will be recorded, we should probably introduce ourselves. So um, I'll start. I'm Father Aaron Leitch. I am ordained in the Gnostic tradition, and I am a practitioner of the Solomonic tradition of magic, particularly Abramelin. And I've got a lot of experience in the Enochian or Enochian system of magic as well. And yeah, especially with Abramelin being my main basis of spiritual practice, um, that really makes the spiritual side of things important. So I'm
Mhm.
very happy to be here to talk about this today. And who are you, sir?
Who am I? I am Aaron Davis. I too, I'm an ordained minister in a couple of different traditions: the United Church of Christ and an independent um, Anglican tradition. So that's kind of where the higher churchy aspects of me come from. But I'm also a son of the Black Church. In my family roots, we are AME Zion and National Baptist. So that even though I'm not in those traditions, I always say to everybody, you don't have to throw out who you were to become who you are. And there's a lot of aspects of those traditions that are still very meaningful to me. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit tonight too. But in addition to that, I'm also an indigenous ATR practitioner. I practice Espiritismo, which I know you, Aaron, and your wife also are knowledgeable of that tradition as well. Um, I practice Lukumi, or what's known as Santeria, and other traditions, and I'm a priest in that tradition. A child of Chongo, and a couple of other things too that are folk related, and hoodoo. I practice and I teach hoodoo, and hoodoo for me is really the crossroads practice of all the spirituality that I practice. Is kind of the one that ties them all together, especially when you get down to practical magic. So it's kind of it in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I would say welcome, but we're not really. Neither one of us is meeting on either one's
Right.
channel, so we'll just
We're
say
just
welcome to everyone who's
chilling and
joined us.
chatting.
Oh, we got another person in the waiting room. I want to get in here though. I am hosting, so I get to do all the chores. Okay, so
Thank you for that, brother. I
awesome.
appreciate it.
So we're going to talk about spiritual stuff, and I want everyone who's here with us now to know that if you brought your own topics you want to hear us talk about, questions you want to hear answered, this is less about practical magic, though, and This is about spirituality. So just kind of keep that topic in mind. Otherwise, it's kind of an AMA, right? It's kind of whatever you
Yeah, and
guys.
you can ask about our tradition too. You know, to the extent that we feel free to talk about them. Um,
Absolutely.
I think it's there's a lot of parallels because we've talked about it. There's a lot of parallels between the whole opera melon process and a process like making ocha. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
both
I
going.
I always say that. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say I always
Uh,
say that without Oshani Lele, I never would have been able to do Abramelin because approaching Abramelin from the Western Hermetic standpoint, it was this big amorphous
right.
thing that only adepts would dare touch, and only maybe one or two people in all the world had ever done it. And then through Oshani, I was like, no, people do this all the time. I can
Mm-hmm.
call someone right now, and if you got $3,000, they'll crown you.
Right,
So
right, right.
yeah, I learned. It shifted my perspective, and I learned that this isn't some set aside, unreachable thing. And that's what he says in the book too. In Abramelin, this is where you should start.
Right.
And by hearing him talk about Ocha, it made everything in Abramelin, sorry, suddenly start to make sense. So yeah, I
Right.
didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean it's just
No,
like,
that's
man,
okay.
that is so spot on that where these traditions cross.
I think there's somebody else
Total
in the waiting
magic.
room too.
Oh, yep, thank you. Yeah, let me know if you see someone and I'm running my mouth and don't see him.
That's
Okay.
all right. It's all
So
right.
anyway, go on with what you're saying, sir. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, no, totally. I agree with you. I think, it would to a person that looks at Melon and then they read anything about the process of making ocha, it almost seems like the processes kind of go in different order because I know from studying and being in relationship with you that Melon kind of builds up. There's a bunch of development you're supposed to be doing prior, whether you do 6 months or longer prior to the crowning itself.
Right.
And and then there's kind of
Ocha's
like a whole
reversed.
other thing that happens on the other side of
Mm-hmm.
that you talk about very
Right.
powerfully, very, very powerfully.
Absolutely.
So Ocha is kind of, it looks like it's in reverse in that you're developing as a practitioner in the Orisha tradition, usually for around 5-ish years.
Yeah, that's
And,
what I was gonna say. That's a lot of development and work before you even get to Ocha.
right,
So
right.
yeah, it's not like
And
you
then
come
it's
in
like
blind
you
at
make
all.
Ocha, and most African systems are this way where you get the initiation and there's kind of that immediate alignment with whatever spirit it is that you're getting it from. And then you're spending years after that understanding what the heck just happened to you. Um,
Yes.
so they're really not. It looks like they're in a different order, but they're really not. It's actually pretty much the same thing because the way you talked about, I think in the class actually, how you did your crowning, went through the whole process, did the crowning, didn't even have half the resources that we have now in Melon, and then you were kind of expecting the burning bush experience, and that's not what happened.
Not at all.
And you're like, what is going on? What did that actually work? And so
Yep.
Ocha is kind of similar where once that Orisha settles on you, you feel different, but it's not like all of a sudden like you're walking around and you're like a spiritual giant. Like you feel like, okay, now I have to really adjust to what just happened to me. You're having a lot of conversation with elders and they're telling you bits and pieces of things. And it really, I'm how many years on now? I think I'm 12 in Ocha or something like that.
Wow.
And you know, I still feel like I just scratched the surface of all of that. All of that. Still learning,
Yeah.
still developing, still growing, still trying to understand what even happened to me that day, that 7 days, you know,
That's and that's
because you
amazing
can't
because
put
I
it all in the
was
words.
yeah, and that is so parallel to exactly what I experienced too. Because I mean, I think I've told you this story before, but like you said, afterward, I wasn't sure what the hell just happened. I mean,
Right.
Oshana used to make fun of me during the 6 months. He was making so much fun of me because he knew I was expecting this burning bush, this
Right.
Ezekiel's vision. And
Right.
now
Right.
I'm
Right.
just like, what the hell? I'm exhausted. I don't know what the hell just happened. Maybe I had a vision. And yeah, you go to your elders, and that's what I did. I went to the people I considered my elders. I went to Oshani, I went to Chick Cicero. I was only just beginning to develop a relationship with him. Went to a couple other people that, and yeah, they each one of them had kind of a different piece of it for me.
Right. Right.
And I love the way Chick put it. He said, "Right now, you and the angel are babies. You were
Right.
literally just born. That day in the oratory was your birthday. You are infants." And it's the same with, and this is true, and you know this. So I'm kind of talking to our listeners that it's this is true of Ocha. This is true of Abramelin. This is true if you're setting up a spirit pot or an altar. Once you bring that entity down into it, you're you haven't trapped that entity. Like if I
Right.
build an altar to Michael and I have an icon and I bond Michael to that icon, Michael, the great archangel, is not trapped in my icon. He
Right.
gives
Right. Right.
birth. He gives birth to a new spirit
Right.
named Michael. It is a perfect fractal copy of the big guy. He will answer to the name Michael. He is Michael, but it's a little one. That's what goes in. And that's what goes in. And um, oh, I'm starting to lose my train of thought now. Sometimes when I talk about this stuff, my mind just goes. Um, but oh yeah, I did lose my train of thought. Anyway, go on, and it'll hit me again,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'll
Totally.
pop and I'll jump back in. It's how my brain works. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Help get me back on track.
And when it comes back, let me know. I I think I often say to people, because people do reach out and they want to jump into something like Ocha, and I always say, like, it's really not for everybody, because one of the things that takes a lot of getting used to, that I do think is different from Abramelin, from what I know, but correct me if I'm wrong, is we have what's called an etat. So three days after you have the crowning ceremony in Orisha, you sit on a mat, and there's a very skilled diviner that sits with you, and they spend several hours, and they're basically talking to each one of your Orishas that you received that day 3 days ago, and each one of those Orishas is supposed to give you advice for the rest of your life. And so then it's understood that whatever they say, you have to follow that. Now, you're not going to be like punished or beaten down or something if you mess up and break one of the things that they say, oh, don't do that. It's not quite like that, but it is the kind of thing where if a new priest, especially even after they come out of their year in white is called, if they continue to flagrantly violate those things, they will start to have problems. For example, sometimes we get things taken away, even places that we can go to. So there are priests that, for
Yeah.
example, because Ochun really loves them, and Ochun, for people who don't know, she's sort of the goddess of the river. I'll just put it that way. We don't really use the terms gods and goddesses in that tradition, but that's probably the easiest way for people to understand her.
Translated. Yeah.
Yeah. So if she's particularly close to you, she might be like, my baby. And so what happens is, when that priest is talking to her, they'll sense that kind of energy, and it might even come up that you're not supposed to ever go in the river again, ever, unless it's for a specific ritual purpose. So I've known people that had that restriction. I've heard these stories where, for whatever reason, they went into a river. Either they forgot about it, or they just didn't care, or in some cases, sometimes some of us are foolish enough to think that either it doesn't apply to us, or that
Or it
nothing's
won't
really
happen
going to
to me.
happen if I do that.
Yeah.
And so I've heard the stories of santeros and santeros who went into the river water for whatever reason, and next thing they know, like the water like starts to get really crazy and pulls them downstream,
Mm.
and all their clothes get
Mm-hmm.
taken off. So then
Wow.
they're trying to get out of the water, and they might even get out of the water if they don't drown, but now they're butt naked.
Now they naked.
trying to get back to civilization, looking like a caveman. So
Wow.
I've heard those stories. I've heard stories like that of the ocean as well, where people went into the ocean when they weren't supposed to, and they ended up getting like pulled all the way out. And the ocean can be, I've experienced it, where the ocean's super calm, and then I walk up and start praying to Yemaya, and then all of a sudden, like, the waves start getting really crazy and the water starts really coming in, and I'm like running back on, whoa, trying to keep from getting pulled into the water.
Yeah.
So you discover pretty quickly that these nature forces, like, it's really real.
And
It's
and you're
really real.
describing them. You're describing the best case scenarios and
Right.
those where the Orisha are being nice about it.
Correct.
I know. So way back when I first joined the Golden Dawn, I heard a tale. So I never met the guy. This was an adept from years ago, but they brought out a linen napkin, a linen handkerchief. Actually, it was a linen handkerchief, and they unfolded it and they showed me this talisman that had been drawn on this handkerchief. I forget the talisman or what grimoire it comes from, which is probably a good thing, honestly, because the talisman was supposed to be inscribed on linen, hence the linen handkerchief, and it was in some way it was supposed to summon the gnomes.
Okay. So the earth
And
earth
so this
elementals,
guy,
correct?
the earth elementals, and so this guy made this talisman, and I don't know what he did with it or what he was hoping to achieve with it, but he was one way or another. The man died by being mauled to death by a bull. The symbol of
Oh,
Taurus,
that mercy.
the
Right.
Western symbol of the earth element, Taurus.
Yeah.
He conjured the gnomes, and they played with them, and that, yeah, like you said, forces of nature. I'm glad you brought that up because this is something I'd love to address. I remember a few years ago, some folks got very angry at me because I had made the comment that in like Santeria, just like you said, you can get restrictions. You can get all sorts of things about what colors you can wear, foods you can eat,
All of that.
places you can go. I mean, it's all, it blows my mind the kind of dedication that you have to pour into that. And I said, now by comparison to that, we have Abramelin, which that's like a baby system compared to what you have to undergo in to undertake Ocha.
Right.
Like, it doesn't immediately start demanding all those particular things of you and stuff. And the reason I wanted to bring that up again and address it is because I think folks made the assumption that because I come from the Abramelin side of that, I'm saying ours is better because it doesn't demand all that of you. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I stand in awe of how much, it must be poured into it and the responsibility that you have to take on in order to work with these entities that are elemental. And I don't mean they're elementals. I mean elemental as in the mountain, the sky, the river, the storm, like the forces of nature. And to take those on your shoulders requires a lot.
Yeah.
And no, I like deep respect I have for that, and I always did. That's why I learned so much from Oshani, because I saw him doing that, and I'm like, holy,
Right. Right.
And the Holy Guardian Angel can give you commands like that, but it's not the same. It's not like, your guardian angel, like in my case, just in my experience, my guardian angel has recommended things to me that will help my health, that will help me in all sorts of ways, but not doing them doesn't mean that I'm going to have
misfortune.
The forces of nature crash down on me,
Right.
So yeah, no, I deep respect for what like someone like you goes through in order to take on that responsibility and be a priest of any given Orisha and what it demands,
Right.
So yeah, no, I absolutely not elevating Abramelin because it requires less. It's the opposite, because the more something requires, and I always tell my students this, when it comes to shortcuts and magic and stuff, the more you put in, the more you get out.
Well, you said that in I don't know, people who are on here are aware, but you teach about Abramelin, but you also teach even more courses on, I guess you would call it, Solomonic magic.
Yes,
which I know Abramelin kind of falls into that, kind of doesn't. But one of the things you said in there, in one of the classes that I sat in is you were talking about, um, to paraphrase you, kind of like how you know it's your voice versus like an angel that you're
Right.
hearing or perceiving or whatever. And what we're talking about right now, this is one of the places where you know that it's not just you, because not only do you have in the Orisha tradition and other traditions like it the Ita, like that big reading, but even as you're living your life, like you said about the holy guardian angel, your spirit will come and say, "Hey, you're eating way too much fried food. It's messing you up internally. You need to really cut that down, or you need to stop eating it altogether." Or
Mm-hmm.
hey, you're drinking too much alcohol. You're destroying your liver, you're destroying your health, your mental health is taking a dive. So you can't drink it. And if you in the ATR traditions, if you think you can ignore that voice and keep doing it, then what's going to happen is when you go to a reader, and really any kind of reader, like they could go to you and your wife, and even though like an Orisha won't necessarily speak in the divination tools that you use outside of the tradition, they will talk to another spirit that walks with that person who can speak through
Communicate.
those tools. And you're like, hey, so I'm seeing it looks like an African man. He looks like he might be Congo, and he's got like a bottle of liquor, and he's taking his machete and he just smashed the whole thing, and he's looking really angry at you, and he's going like you shouldn't be drinking. Are you drinking too much? And I'm just like, shit. Oh, really? And they're getting to me through you, because they're like, you didn't get it the first time, so we're gonna tell you again,
So,
and we're gonna tell you
try
again, and we're
try
gonna tell
another
you again.
avenue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it happen even in my own readings. Um, I've read people, and you know, um, they may not even be in an ATR. They might be a pagan something or other, and I'll see their deity will like show up and be like, "Hey, I need them to get this message," and then I tell them, and then I kind of say, "I think this God has said this to you before, right?" And they get real
Mm-hmm.
quiet. They're like, "Yes." I was like, "Okay, well, you know,
Is
you
it?
have a real connection to them, and this is part
Yeah.
of the realness of the connection. And not going to just they're not going to just validate your bad choices and the bad decisions. They should check you at some point, because that's essential to our development. You know,
Exactly. Yeah, in the first class in the section that I just gave on the Solomonic course, we covered that.
mm-hmm.
I posted the slide from that, the
Very
red
well said.
flags of spirit communication. And yeah, if they don't challenge you, if they believe, if they agree with everything you believe, if they act exactly the way you expect them to act and say exactly what you expect them to say, then you're talking to yourself, you
Right,
know. And I'm one of the first proponents to changing the way humans relate to the divine, and that we shouldn't be bowing down and fearing them anymore. We shouldn't be working with any entity, deity, angel, spirit, whatever, that's going to give us commands and punish us if we don't follow. But
right,
that said, your guardians, your helpers, the spiritual entities that actually give a damn about you, they should be pushing you. I mean, they will put pressure on you. If you're going and you're drinking too much and you just won't get the message, they'll keep cranking it up. That's not punishing you. They're
right,
trying to they're non-corporeal entities. They can't just walk in the door and get, "Hey, idiot," and slap you upside the head. So they have to
right.
they have to metaphorically come in the door and slap you upside the head sometimes, but I don't, and I can't speak for any of the Orisha tradition, but I do know that with my guardian angel, she's done that, but it's never been in the sense of, thou hast sinned and now I'm going to smite thee. It's
Right,
always been like your best friend coming in and going, "Dude, what the
right,
hell?
right,
What
right,
is
right,
wrong with you?" That's the energy I get. And it's like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Yeah,
right.
and so that's how it should be, and that's how the relationship with the spiritual should be. It
Yes.
should never be a cowering, and this, but I always point out to people that when the Bible says to fear God,
Oh,
that's that's an archaic use of the word fear.
Right.
And modern fundamentalists love to say, oh, yeah, you should be afraid of God. God's going to get you. Nope. That's not what that word means. It's an archaic meaning of fear, which is today we use the word awe, to stand in
Right.
awe of. And when it says, fear thou the Lord, it means when this great grandeur of the entire universe is before you, it should make you want to go down on your knees and just be mind blown by what you're seeing. And if not, then you're not really talking to God, are you? You know, you're talking to something
Right.
smaller. So that's what fear. So yeah, we should never fear them, but they can turn up the heat under our feet sometimes, you know.
Absolutely. I think Alexi
Do we have? Oh, okay. I
said
have
a
that up.
question later about prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Lexi. You can either type it, or if you want to, you can unmute and just ask. However you want to do it, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Or we can talk about prayer.
I'd love to know what she'd like to know about prayer. Or I say she, Alexi. I should say they. I'm
All
not
right.
sure. I think Alexi might be a brother. Oh, someone in the waiting room. Let him in here.
My apologies. I can't seem to unmute. That's okay.
That's okay. Just type it in the chat. I know how it is to struggle with the earphones and the microphones and everything. Oh, and you know what? While we're waiting on that, I did remember when my mind just flew off, because we were
Go for it.
talking about how powerful you should be after something like Ocha or Abramelin or 5-6 in the Golden Dawn or performing Liberlo Jebba Fall, you know, whatever it is. And that's why I was talking about these angels are not, you don't get the whole angel, you get a newborn spirit. So that you and the spirit are newborn. And so you're not going to be powerful when you come out. You're going to feel maybe less powerful, actually, as you're trying to get yourself oriented. And over the years, as you work with the entity, both it and you grow together. And that's a big part of what Gilberto Strapazon warns about, because he says that, you know, like a lot of these candomblé houses and stuff, they'll get a spirit, and then they'll raise it corrupted. They'll raise it to do evil things, and they'll raise it to be hateful and vengeful. And then now you have a corrupted entity, and it's not the entity's fault. You know, it's the human's fault.
Right.
So anyway, here's this
question.
question.
And to your point, just to quickly add to that, when in I'm using Orisha as the example. I have other examples, but in Orisha tradition, one of the things you do in preparation for your ceremony is you go to the house of elders, especially if you're being initiated in Cuba, you go to the house of elders. And when you go, you salute that elder, but you also salute their Orishas. And I'm going to tell you that the difference between me and them, besides the obvious, is there you're talking about people who, when they came out of their mother's womb, they started practicing much like we do with Christianity here in America, you know, because that's kind of the predominant religion here. So by the time that person becomes a priest, and then definitely by the time they become like a godparent, where they have other people who are kind of following them and learning and developing and probably receiving Orishas through them, when you go in front of their Orishas, sometimes you can feel it from that human being, but when you go in front of your Orishas, like, you're definitely going to feel like those are not baby Orishas. You know, if this person's been a priest for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years or something crazy like that, those entities that they work with are also going to feel massive energetically. I mean, to the point where you might even feel crowded in their house. Like the house might feel like packed, because the energy of that spirit takes up so much space energetically and spiritually that you can feel it when you walk into the house. Versus like when I made Ocha, I know it didn't feel like that. Like you said, it was like a baby Chungo that was growing with me.
Yeah.
So it's there's also there's also a mysticism that's very important. So these are traditions where you have to have an understanding of mysticism and mediumship. That's why SPDT mode is so important, because that helps you to understand spiritual phenomenon in a way that few other systems really help you understand, like on a fundamental level. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, that's why their altars grow.
right. Yeah,
Because
they do. They literally do.
and I the way I put it, and I borrow the word from your tradition because there's not a word in the West that really hits it. And I say that you spend those years building ashe at that
Right.
altar,
Right.
and that's what you're feeling when you walk into those old orishas. Yeah, they've got this ashe, and ashe, for those listening, the best translation in the West is power or
Power.
energy, but that's not a good translation. It's more like life force or uh, what do they call it? Kundalini, not Kundalini. Yes, the
Well,
force through
what's a good
like in Tantra. It's a
a,
visceral life force.
a good Western fantasy way of talking about that is the Force. The
The
Force is a
force. There you go.
wonderful
I've always likened
fantasy
the
illustration
force
of that.
to like the whole Jedi religion. I figure was adopted mainly from Taoism.
Right.
So I look at the force as the Tao.
Right.
If you read the book of the Tao, you are reading about the force.
Right. Right. So
Absolutely.
something like Orisha, all that entity really is it's that force energy that has taken on a particular form in the created order to serve a particular function. So like Chungo is
Exactly.
on Earth, he's understood to be like a deity of fire, lightning, war, but he also has cosmic elements, which people don't often talk about or think about. But he's also very cosmic. And in other traditions, other than Orisha, sometimes that's a little clear because of the other manifestations of how he appears in other places where the cosmic aspect comes through a little stronger. But
Hmm.
you can
That's actually
tell,
fascinating.
yeah, and you can tell with them that, um, like I said, and in some traditions they're called mysteries, mysterios. So there is a mystery to how can something be on the earth and cosmic at the same time? What did that even mean? What did that look like? It's kind of sort of how you talk about the holy guardian angel, where it's here, but it's also kind of not here, and
That's
it's here,
right.
but it's not from here. So it's there's a mystical tension there that is not something that you can resolve or reconcile with words. Like you have to really experience it. Um,
That's a good way to put it because yeah,
yeah,
it's very hard to reconcile in words.
right.
That's why I used the word fractal before because I think that's the
Yeah,
best way to
that's a good word.
describe. It's especially when you're talking about the Kabbalah or any of these, dealing with spirits that you're calling down and binding to objects because the and this you get. I think that Zohar talks about this when it talks about God. It's like if you take any sliver, any little part of God and look at it, all of God is there.
Right,
You can't divide God.
right, right.
So and that to me they had never heard of fractals back then, so now so it's a perfect modern word for that. It's like the whole is always contained in every little part, and it's true of God, and it's true of the archangels, and it's true of all the spirits that we work with. They're not corporeal entities. They live in the same realm, to use kind of a fantastical word, as our thoughts and ideas live. So
Right.
they live and they operate and they move in the same ways that ideas flow from person to person and through cultures and through time. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can't contain them, you can't kill them off, you can't it's okay. So I should probably get to Alexi's question here.
Yes.
I recall, I believe it's Ezra Regardi's quote about inflame thyself with
That's a
prayer.
prayer.
And I feel at this point that anytime I pray or someone around me prays, I find that I get an effect, like a shower and sometimes burning over my crown. Any chances you guys can unpack that for me? Um, I have thoughts, but do you have anything you want to throw onto that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I that
Be
dovetails a
interested in
little
what you
bit with
say.
what we were just talking about in a sense. There is there can be a mysticism to prayer, but it kind of also depends on the tradition that you practice or you come from. So again, being a son of the Black church, we're very big in the Black church on the Holy Spirit, or what I still like to call the Holy Ghost. So if people are not aware or familiar, the worship style of Black Christian, generally speaking, I mean, there's I'm being very generalizing here, but the worship style is very embodied. You know, if you go to most mainline, predominantly white churches, it tends to be kind of neck up. There's not even a lot of movement in the body that happens generally. But in a Black church, it's fully embodied. You know, people literally will catch the Holy Spirit, which is spirit possession. They will catch the Holy Spirit, and I've seen it. I grew up seeing it, especially in Baptist and Pentecostal churches, not so much Methodist, but Baptist and Pentecostal churches. They will catch the Holy Spirit, and you will see that usually a person's like praising and throwing up their hands, and then if it's legit, which is a whole other conversation, if it's legitimate, they start to change. I mean, I don't really know how to say it any other way, but they start to change, and the person's kind of there and kind of not.
Mm,
And then their body starts to make a number of involuntary movements. In the Black church culture, generally there are usually women that are tasked with kind of putting a hedge of protection around that person, where you would literally see like three or four people surround that person and just sort of um, kind of be almost like the bumpers in a pinball thing, where they're there and the person's kind of bouncing around, but they make sure that they're not bashing their head on a pew or running up against the wall or something like that. And and then any number of things can happen. They can start to kind of shout out by the spirit. They can start to do a glossolalia. That's kind of the 10-cent term, which means that they're speaking in tongues. Um, some people, I think, if they're developed enough, even as a Christian, they can actually start to give messages and prophesy. They call it. So Christians have terminology that for us occultists, if to me when I see that stuff, it's no different from like if Aaron was possessed by his holy guardian angel. I'm sure she could give messages through you, and that's no different from what happens in the church to me. But my point in bringing it up is prayer is something that it is fully embodied. It tends to be more spontaneous. There's not a lot of rote praying like we do, like in ceremonial magic. Most of our praying is rote, at least to start, to kind of get us on the path. And then I've done it where my Black church kicks in, and then I just start, praying to Archangel Michael, just straight from my heart.
straight from the heart.
It's just coming out of me.
Abramaga does
So
that. It doesn't give you any invocations. It tells you to just write your own, and then when you
right,
hit the end of if you write them, when you hit the end, just keep going. You have to learn to
right,
just keep going. It's
right,
a
right,
big
right.
part of the system.
So I see what he said, or they said. I see what they wrote as that's what that is for me. That you're engaging in whatever kind of prayer practice you do, and your prayer practice isn't just the uttering of words; it's actually embodying itself in your whole body. So to me, one of the ways that I know my practices to be true is because they register in my body. My Christianity kind of sort of registers in my body, but my indigenous stuff registers in my body. Like when I'm doing, like I did a ceremony this past weekend, and I called on the spirit that was assisting me to do it, and I felt that spirit come, and I started getting really hot, and my and very lightheaded, and I could feel that energy like kind of overshadowing me and starting to give me direction about how to do what I was doing, how to put things together. And then saying, okay, this person also needs a cleansing for this, a healing for that. Do this, do that, do this. And so I'm doing everything that spirit is directing me to do. And when I was done, you could have nudged me, and I would have fallen right over
Falling
because
over.
that energy was on me for like 4 hours. And because that's the kind of work I was doing. So it was an actual ceremony, it was a longer ritual. So that's the same thing. That's the same thing where if you keep doing that, other things are probably going to happen to you. If you're experiencing stuff all in your crown area when you're praying, that to me, that means some kind of higher order spirit is definitely with you and definitely hearing and responding to your prayers. So you can reasonably expect that you're going to have more dramatic experiences. I don't necessarily mean you're going to get possessed, but kind of like I just said about that ceremony, you can reasonably expect that spirit is going to overshadow you at times, and not in a way to be scared about, like nothing to be afraid of. It's just that's your development. It's your camino. It's your spiritual path. That when you pray, that's how whoever that spirit is, that's how that spirit is connecting to you, to your head, to your spirit. That's what I think.
Wow. Brother, you've given me so much to unpack and respond to. There, actually, the initial question and you. So let me see if I can. Let me see if I can get
Go
on
for it.
top
Go
without
for it. Go for
forgetting
it.
anything. So my mind's gonna go off in 1,000 directions here. But
It's
okay.
all right.
So let me start with that feeling on
We
the
call
head.
that
It's not
jazz.
right. So yeah, I have felt that as well. I never felt it until after I performed Abramelin. And it was kind of in that period of my life when she was just working in my brain hardcore, like just after in the years after Abramelin, joined the Golden Dawn, started going up to the grades. I was also doing a lot of Solomonic and Enochian work at the same time. So, I mean, all this stuff, and I don't mean as performing Abramelin. I mean, after I completed Abramelin, I'm doing Solomonic and Enochian work with her help, of course. So all this is going on, and man, my brain is just being rewired, and there are many times, especially through that period, I would be in the oratory doing my prayers, and it felt. I had a couple of ways of describing it. One way would describe it would be it felt like a crown of thorns had been placed around my head, but like a crown of thorns, but made of fire, had been placed around my head, and it would just tingle and burn prickly all the way around here. The other one was it felt like the top of my head was opening like the petals of a flower, like a lotus. And I wasn't trying to draw on Eastern symbolism. I'm just saying that's the best way to describe it. I can totally understand why that became a symbol in Eastern practice. And the top of my head open, and it was just like this, like a Marvel movie sky beam, just coming straight from up right onto the gray matter of my brain. I mean, and it was just like I could feel that work being done. And when I looked into that, I discovered, you said it, the Pentecost. And it's in the New Testament. You can look it up. And it was either disciples or just people who were early parts of the Christian movement. I forget if it was the actual disciples, but I do know several people went into a building, and Jesus had told them just before he left, because they wanted to know, how do we get this? How do we get this?
Right.
What
Right.
Abramelin would call the sacred wisdom, the sacred magic. How do we get this power, the Holy Spirit? And Jesus said, lock yourself in a room and start praying, and don't stop praying until it hits you. That's it. That was the whole instruction. And essentially, that's Abramelin in a nutshell, right? So they locked themselves in the room and they prayed nonstop. I think they even fasted, and it was a do or die kind of thing. And it took them 9 days. And after the 9 days, they described felt like their heads had caught on fire. And you'll see that in art. Even they'll show the Pentecost,
Yes.
and they're standing there with the
They all
halos.
have tongue to flame on their head. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the halos you see around saints' heads. It goes back to the Shekinah that shone from Moses' head, made his face red. This is all a description of the same thing. And it is that, yeah, it's when you're doing the prayers and you're working a system, answering the original question, and you're actually, change is coming upon you, that enlightenment that you're looking for. I mean, it's not a one time and done thing. It just means, as you're there in your prayers or you're doing the ritual and you just feel your head open up and you feel that energy coming down, that is your guardian. Those are your guardians working on your brain. and making you what the Golden Dawn called more than human. Um, the second thing, though, you went into talking about being mounted.
Mm.
Let
Right, right.
me tell you. Now I'm a drummer. I play a doumbek, and I learned how to play that doumbek down here in Florida. At the same time, I was hanging out with Oshani and all those
Uh-oh,
ATR
uh-oh.
people right here in the swamps, buddy. And I tell you what, it was so much fun to watch these guys. And they never. I never learned the drum beats for the Orisha. Probably a good idea, honestly, but I never learned them. But these guys, those drum beats, and if you'll just fall into them,
Mhm.
and they would fall into like a chango or whatever,
Right.
and sensitive people would end up flipping out.
Yeah,
It would look like they were having seizures and stuff, and
right.
people have to go catch them, and they would get mounted right there. And even people outside the tradition sometimes would just start having problems, and there's techniques to protect people from that. But yeah, it was just wild to see that thing, that kind of thing happening. Especially when the
Yeah.
drummers, when we really go at it. I don't know if you know what the term blooded means in the drumming community, but I mean, if you're really going at it for a long time and doing this for long, long periods of time, it's kind of how you do it. And eventually you'll split a finger and you'll start seeing a little red spot on your drum. And then that little red spot will grow and grow and grow. So now you're
Feeding
actual blood is
it.
being spilled, which
All
I
right.
tell my students never do that. Don't offer your blood to any spirit ever unless you're trained to do it. Don't do
Right.
it. um but yeah, so I've seen mounting. I remember when my early days of Abramelin, my guardian angel, she did show indication that she wanted to do that. She would. My earliest experiences were, first of all, I would have to get rip roaringly stoned. It was my early days of smoking. If I was my guardian angel who said, "You need weed, go get weed. This is what your brain needs," and she started me on
That's
my
awesome.
cannabis. I grew up as a clean, straight kid, and it was by the end of Abramelin, she's like, "No, no, 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 go get the cannabis." So I would get stoned, and this is the early days. So I mean, it could just really get me knocked out, right? And I would be talking to a friend or something, and they'd ask me something, and I would realize that I was hearing my voice answer, but I wasn't actually doing it, and it would feel like I was listening to my own voice down a hallway.
Right, right.
And that's when we realized she was speaking through me, and she would say the weirdest stuff too, man. I remember a friend of mine, if he would ask me a question when I was stoned and I would come back with just something really freaking weird, he'd grab a pen and paper and write it down. He was like, "Nope, that was sufficiently weird. That wasn't you." He'd write
Right,
it
right, right.
down.
It'll make sense
But
later, right?
I got on this idea that I really wanted her. I wanted her to mount me. I wanted to know what that was like. And Shani and the other elders that were around me at the time would say that you're trying too hard. You can't force it.
Right.
And it's amazing to me that you brought up. You said that these involuntary body motions, and that different involuntary motions can be associated with different orisha. Depending on
Correct.
who's
Absolutely.
grabbed you, you're going to do different things. um I mean, I heard stories of people running around the place, grabbing roaches and eating them. I mean, all sorts of weird stuff, man. You never know, depending on what that orisha likes or what that spirit likes. So I think it took me a long time to grasp that body motion thing, because it's not just about things you do after they mount you. But while I was trying to consciously invite it and nothing was happening, it took me years to realize that when it was starting to happen on its own, I caught a body motion of my own. I realized what I was physically doing just before that feeling would start to settle on me. And I swear to God, the second I realized that and was able to let go and stop trying, and when I would catch myself doing that one motion, I'd quit trying, and I would just flow into it. I'd relax into it, and that's when it would happen. That's when it actually comes down. So yeah, the body motions. It's. I think this goes back to, like I said, about Ashe being a visceral force. Like you said, you feel it in your body.
Right.
Going to church and worshiping is one thing, but to call it down, to open your skull, bring it down, to have them mount you, these are the visceral, real world effects and experiences of this kind of work. Like you said, mysticism. And I always tell my students, don't believe anyone who tells you that you can ever be a magician without being a mystic first.
Right.
You can be a mystic maybe without being a magician, but it will never work the other way, because without the mysticism, you're not making that connection. They're not opening your head. They're not rewiring you. They're not expanding you. They're not, I even got mounted once by another archangel, Gabriel. And I think the listeners will love this story. It's one of my favorites, actually. I probably told you about it before. But once I had learned how to let it happen, it was actually Gabriel that came down. I don't even know if, no, I think my guardian angel had mounted me previous to that. But anyway, this is the first time in public because I was giving a class at an occult bookstore on
Oh
Hermetic
wow.
Golden Dawn style magic. And the way I do the class, it starts at the beginnings, and then little by little, we work all the way up until we do a full evocation of an archangel at the end. And more time, I let them choose the archangel, but more times than not, they go with Gabriel, because if you look at the tree of life, Gabriel is your first step on the tree going up.
Okay.
So we called Gabriel. Now, a little bit of backstory. Two of my students, a couple, had come to me between classes and told me that the male was having, I can't remember his name, but he was having trouble. Like, he had done some really foolish things, magically speaking, invoking the wrong kinds of entities because I think he was trying to get into demonolatry or something like that, and did not know what he was doing. And he was the kind of person, this doesn't happen to everybody, but he was the kind of person who they started obsessing him and they started messing with him. And it was to the point that literally his family was about to commit him.
Wow.
And they were asking if there was anything that could be done. And I told them I would see, I would look into it. The next class we had was that evocation. And Gabriel, after I did the conjuration and I had everybody sit down, the way I do it in the class is I conjure the angel, and then everyone sits in the circle, closes their eyes, and I start them with a guided meditation to kind of lead them into the astral and to Gabriel's temple. And then I shut up. I don't like guided meditation. I shut up and I let them have their experience with the angel. So I had done that, and everyone was off having their own little astral experience. Meanwhile, I catch myself doing the thing. And I'm like, oh God, not here. What's going on? This is a public class.
Right. How am I going to handle this?
So Gabriel and I enter this negotiation. He's like, I'm going to take care of that guy. I'm going to exercise what's in him. And he starts telling me what he wants me physically to get up and do. And it wasn't nice. I think it had to do with, he wanted me to take the candle off the altar and pour the wax over the poor guy's head. This is Gabriel. Like, you guys think Gabriel's the angel of the moon?
That makes sense,
nice,
Gabriel. Right.
Angel. Gabriel means Gaboriel. He's severity of God. He used to do Samael's job before Samael took that position. Okay. So he's like, yeah, I want you to pour it. And I was like, no. And so I'm like, no. And remember this, guys. I told an archangel, no, you can tell them no. I can't do that. And he was like, all right, then pick up the water and pour it over his head. I'm like, well, that still could get me in a lot of trouble. Could I make it? He's like, fine, make him drink it. Make him drink every drop of it. I was like, okay, that I'll do. And then I just let him settle over me, and I let go. And I stood up. Now imagine all these poor people who have no idea. No idea what's going on,
they're
right?
gone, right?
I stand up and I walk over to the altar, and I've got my wand with me. I think it was my Abramelin wand. And I pick up the glass and I stomp over to him, and I surprise him, and I shove that glass right in his mouth, and I'm going, drink it all, drink it. And he's going glub, 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 glub. And he drinks it all down. And then Gabriel I brought my hand up, and I swear to God, he was going to bash that poor kid in the head with that wand. but I held it back, and I just brought it down and firmly touched him on the top of his head, and then just expelled air, just you know. And then I went around to the everyone else and used the same wand to mark a cross on all of them to protect them from whatever I just kicked out of this guy. And but I say this wasn't me. I let go.
Right.
Gabriel
Right.
did this, and then sat back down, and he let me go. And then I was left to sit there and explain what the hell had just happened to these
Right.
poor
Right.
people. But yeah, that. So yeah, it is a lot about doing the mystical work, learning, knowing yourself, and learning how to let go. And when you
Mm,
have these experiences, you can't force them. You just have to. It takes years to build up the momentum, and
yeah.
then those kinds of things can start happening. But those are my being mounted stories. That's about all I've got for being mounted. I mean, that's
Well, this
pretty
isn't
intense
me,
stuff.
but I told somebody this story recently. So in the Orisha world, the main style of worship is something called a bembe. So bembe is kind of like church, where you go and the community gathers. Um, there's usually lots of santeros and santeras there. There'll be drummers, like a full retinue of drummers, and usually several hours of drumming and dancing and singing to the different orishas. So usually about a third to halfway through, then the different santeros who are caballos, who are horses for Orisha, they start passing the Orishas, like they start coming down. And so um, I remember probably not early, but I would say 2-3 years into being a practitioner of it, I noticed that um, people were kind of excited and scared at the same time, and I didn't understand why they were scared. But there were certain priests of an Orisha called Elegua. So Elegua is how do I describe him succinctly? He is
You could describe
the
them.
yeah, right. He's the chief crossroads spirit within Orisha. He's like Hermes. He's not Hermes, but he's like Hermes in that he's the divine messenger, he's the communicator. He is kind of the manifestation of all possibilities and choice at the same time. Like when we have every possibility in front of us, and then when we make a choice to go in a certain direction, all of
It's
that
the
is Eloqua.
crossroads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of that is him, right? But that also means of all the Orishas, in many ways, he's the one that is he also had a really big enforcer kind of vibe. So because he regulates the tradition and the people who practice it so that they stay as focused as possible on developing themselves and developing good character. So when you're doing sketchy stuff, so then I started to figure it out, because when the priest of Elegua, two of them in particular, when they would start shaking and their Elegua was starting to come, you would literally see people kind of go, "Oh shit!" and they would literally run out of the Bembe room, and sometimes try to leave the entire thing altogether. Right? The Orisha comes down. There's Kelly laughing. The Orisha comes down. Elegua comes down. Now, when the Orishas come down at a
Magic.
Bembe, they're not supposed to leave the place where the Bembe is taking place. Like they're supposed to stay in there, and they know that. The Orishas know that, and we know that. But I saw it multiple times where people would start to run in. Elegua would come down, and he would name it. He'd be like, "Where's so and so? I know they're here. Where are they?" And everybody'd be like, Baba, they left." And he would fly out the door, and they're like, "Whoa, no, wait a minute!" And they're trying like to keep him from leaving. He didn't care. He went right out the door, out down the street, and you would literally see the Elegua like chasing after the person,
Oh
catch him,
wow.
drag them back to the Bembe, put them in front of the entire community, like right in the
Mm.
center of the whole community, and then immediately proceed to air all their business. All their business. Like I heard affairs. I heard um, really bad stuff that I won't even say here, that
Yeah.
have to do with abuse and things like that.
Yeah.
And you
He
know,
calls him out on all of it.
yeah, and we, societally we're horrified, but you got to remember with African spirits in particular, they didn't have police. They didn't
Yeah,
have that stuff like we do in this society and most societies at this point. So the
no
police were the
community.
spirits, and there were
Yeah,
specific spirits even in Orisha that their primary purpose was to enforce the laws of that tribe or the laws of that kingdom or the laws of that empire. And so Eloquab very much embodies that energy. So I always
that
tell
makes sense.
people, like, once I knew that that's what was going on, I was like, well, when he would start coming, I was like, well, I'm not running. I'm just gonna stand here because if he comes over and says something to me, I know I'm not perfect, so I just got to be
Right.
ready to take it. And and
I
he
can
and he
see
never
people
did.
being worried.
Yeah, he never came over to like embarrass me like that. But I mean, he did correct me before, but not like that. Um, but they will do that, and this is also why I say to people like, this is not for everybody. This is not stuff to just kind of run into because it looks cool.
Oh
Because
no,
it
it's a
really,
calling.
yeah, in ATR and even Opera Melon, anything that's a heavy duty initiation where a spirit is going inside of you or to your head or some other area of your body and it's like attached to you after you go through a ritual process. Those are things where your life is not your own anymore. And you can't, for example, Chongo children are known for being, when they're not balanced, they're known for being, womanizers and sleeping around and drugs and just doing everything to excess. That's a very unbalanced Chongo. Whether it's a child or the Orisha, very unbalanced because Chongo was like that in previous manifestations of himself, and he evolved out of that to become the Orisha that he is now. But his children, we ain't there yet. So, if we um, slack in our self control, almost always there's a negative consequence. Not again, like you said, Aaron, not because we're being punished, but just because now we're inviting a negative energy to really come around us that can cause us problems, you
Right.
know? So, like you're saying about the mounting stuff and, that like I've heard of those experiences too, where spirit comes in a very inconvenient moment, and then
Yes,
you're literally sitting there
that can
trying to
happen.
negotiate like, hey, I can't have you come in the middle of the board meeting right now. I need you to like chill out. If there's a
Yeah,
message, tell
just
me, but not right now. Yeah. So it can create for some very, very funny moments. Very, very
and
funny
just
moments.
and to speak to what you were saying, not this isn't the kind of stuff you just want to do out of curiosity. Um, I try to stress this to my Abermelon students in particular that it's not a one-off ritual. This isn't something you do Abermelon and now yeah I did Abermelon check and move on. No, you do Abermelon and you're starting a whole new way of life. Like you do Abermelon until you die.
And I'm
And one
sure
last quote.
I would assume that Abramelin initiates who completed the process probably spend a fair amount of time in meditation or reflection on that, like even 10 years from now, if you're a 10-year devotee of your holy guardian angel, that you still periodically reflect back on that experience that led up to you receiving your angel. Because I
Well,
know I do,
it's
you know.
even more than that because once you complete Abermelon, there's different options here. But if possible, you're supposed to leave the oratory in place. And even if you can't, you still keep the altar and everything you used. And you're supposed to go back there every single Sabbath,
uh
and at least at dawn and dusk. You go in there at dawn and you have to do the exact same prayers that you spent 6 or 18 months doing during the rite. Um, there's the silver almadel that you're using to communicate with your angel. So it's like it's reinforced. You got to go back
and
in there at
that must keep the
least
connection very strong too.
at least once a week. And if you're a guy like me, I would actually I had to cut back because when I started the work with Doc Sauls doing work for clients at all the different altars around the house, I would go in and open the Abramelin altar first for each and every one until I ended up getting to the point where I found myself opening the altar like 3 times a day.
All right.
I
All
was like,
right.
okay, here's what we're gonna do. I talked to my angel and we said, okay, just make sure on the Sabbath you come in here and open this up. And if something happens on the Sabbath that you can't, then the next time you have work to
And
do,
make up.
open this up.
Right.
But then you'll be good for the week. She said you're good for the week. Open it up, and then you're good for the week.
So I hope people hear what you just said, because that is even in the ATRs generally, there is tradition. There is, like Abramelin, there's tradition, but then when you develop with your spirit, whoever it is, when you develop with them, at some point, it's not that they throw the tradition out the window, but at some
No.
point, the spirit, in a sense, it sounds weird to say it like this, but the spirit, in a sense, kind of trumps that tradition and says, "Okay, I know you're supposed to do these prayers every Sunday, but I'm watching what you're doing, so I can see that you got a crazy number of orders and readings that came through this week, and I can see that you don't have the time. But when you open up for Aaron to help him with his situation, that's when I want you to say the prayers to me." And so now you start to
Yeah, that makes
see
sense.
that your spirit is leading and guiding you to adjust your practice so that it still works and is viable, and you're being faithful to whatever the devotional requirement is. But it's not like rigid. It's not like set in the stone in a way where you know, like you're obligated to do it that exact same way.
Or that you're
So
going to be
that's very cool.
punished if you miss one, or any,
Right.
yeah, it
Right.
doesn't work that way. It doesn't work.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on with that. And I always tell my students, especially in the Solomonic classes, I tell them that the grimoires, um, for all the mystery and power that's in those grimoires, they're only there to get you in contact with the
Right.
spirits.
Right.
The spirits then teach you the real magic. So I can use the heptameron to contact Michael, but then I'm supposed to ask Michael, how can I better contact you without doing this whole heptameron thing later? And I'm
Right.
supposed to get secret names and sigils and all sorts of stuff to contact him and connect with him.
Right.
So yeah, it's
Question really for you related to that.
they're always going to trump the tradition. They'll give you better ways to do what the book said to do.
Right.
They should.
Question for you. And I never thought to ask you this until now. With the natal angel, the one that like I could work with, can that angel? I don't know how to ask this completely in a way that makes sense, but can that angel be like the holy guardian angel in the sense that they get on your head, or that not? Would it not work like that, or can you pass that angel? Or
that's a really good question, and it goes back to what I was saying about the respect I have for Santeria and Palomeombe and stuff, with what you have to go through to have these entities put to you. And I mentioned that they are the elements of the nature. They are big: mountain, sea, river. These are not little things.
Right.
The forest, the tornadoes. You know who I'm talking about.
Yep, I do.
Right. These are not little guys, and so you do have to be. The guardian angel comes from the other side of the Great Barrier. Like, she could mostly care less about physical concerns, but if you're going to be bonding with an entity who embodies nature, oh yeah, you got some heavy lifting to do.
Right.
Okay. So having resurrected that whole thing I was talking about, it plays into this, because I've had my students ask that, can I put the natal angel to my head and be crowned with that instead of the HGA? And I would say that theoretically it should be totally possible. Like, I don't have any ritual for it or anything, but theoretically that should be doable. But I do believe that if you were to link to your natal angel, who embodies the stars in your chart, therefore embodies the forces of nature, you would be taking on the same kind of responsibility as if you had an Orisha put to your head. So now I think with your natal angel, you're going to have to worry about what colors you wear, where you live, what you can eat. You couldn't eat anything that's antithetical to, like, if your guardian angel, if your Almutant in your chart is Jupiter, then you have a Jupiter angel, and now your whole life better be Jupiter. You better be wearing blue. You better be living in places governed by Jupiter astrologically. You
Right.
have to eat
Right.
foods that are sacred to
Jupiter.
Jupiter, or not eat foods that are sacred to Jupiter, depending on what rules you get. I think all of that would suddenly come into play,
That's a good
and
point.
therefore, in my view, it's just like what I say about offering blood. Don't offer blood ever, especially your own, ever, but even animal blood. Don't do it unless you're trained to do it, because you have to be part of a tradition that has done that for thousands of years and knows the
Right.
protocols and the safety. And you have to be trained by a priest who can show you how to do the offerings of blood. And it's the same with the natal guardian angel. In Santeria, you've got a whole house supporting you. You've got people holding your hand the whole way through the process. And if you go off the track, they can pull you back.
Right.
And if you just go off willy nilly and go, well, I'm going to do Abramelin, but I'm going to bring in my natal angel. I'm going to crown myself with that, buddy. You are on your own. I can't help you because I don't know what's going to happen to you.
Right.
The
Right. Right.
Santorian community probably can't help you. Maybe they
Right.
could give
Right.
you some
Right.
good advice. But see what I'm saying? So yes, theoretically, yes. But for the love
Right.
of God, I wouldn't suggest doing that with anything on this side of the Great Barrier unless you are part of a tradition where you can be trained to do it right.
Well, and you also said something I hadn't considered with my question, which is the difference between the natal and the holy angel is one is from everything you've said and taught me and other people, the holy angel, um, part of the point of having that connection is to transcend that whole, I'll call astrology thing, the whole astrology of when you were born and all the good and bad, especially the bad that's connected with
Yes.
your natal chart.
Right.
So that is actually that's one of the places where Orisha is similar to the holy angel because the point of having them in part is is to also break those cycles of reincarnation and all that stuff if you live the proper way.
Absolutely. Although
But
I
with
do,
something natal, the chances of you doing that are probably harder because, as you said, you're so bound to the color, the herbs, the food, the living in a certain place, and this and that, and
although
so
I do want to add to that though, because I don't want there to be a misconception. Working with your natal angel, not even going so far as crowning with it, but just working with your natal angel, even that angel should help you overcome the negative aspects of your chart.
right,
Um, the way it works is you have to find the name of your angel from where the planets are in your chart, and you're looking for the most powerful and positive aspects. And so the best part of your chart is embodied by that angel. And then if you go to the opposition degree of every single one of those, there you find the name of your demon, the little demon that sits on your left shoulder and gives you bad advice and and
right,
tells you to
right,
give
right,
in to
right.
your lower will. So he embodies all the bad parts of your chart. So I don't want people to think that, well, if I work with my natal angel, I'm going to be restricted to the negative aspects of my chart. Like I have had clients come to me and say, well, I have this issue with Saturn being in this house and it's in detriment and blah blah blah. And
What do I
yes,
do?
you can work with your natal angel to overcome that negative aspect. But still, what you said is essentially correct because your holy guardian angel wants to break you out of that. From a Gnostic sense, astrology, your birth chart, those are chains that are binding you
Right,
to the wheel of reincarnation. And the Gnostic wanted to break those chains and be free and go back home. And so, yeah, the holy guardian angel is that Gnostic sense. We're getting you out of here, and we're like was it Sting or Peter Gabriel? I think it was Sting said, pack your things. We've come to take you home.
right, right, right,
And but your natal angel is more inherent, more
right.
yeah. It is more inherent in the physical universe and your positive aspects. Always fighting with your negative aspects. They're the two entities that sit on your right and left shoulder.
Right.
So
Very cool. I saw that there was a question for you,
there
and I just want to say to
was.
people, don't hesitate with any questions or comments you have to. Please join us in the chat.
Absolutely. So this one is from Sam. It says, Mr. Leach, did you compare Jebophil to Abramelin? Could you go in more depth on how they're related? No, no. I compared Jebophil to Abramelin and also the 5-6 of the Golden Dawn and several other things, not to compare them as equating them as accomplishing the same things. I was only comparing them in these are the kinds of rituals that are massive undertakings, um, like you don't do Jebophil until God says, God will tell you it's time. You don't do it just because you want to.
Mm.
Abramelin, of course, like we've talked about, that's life changing. That is going to alter everything about your life. Going through the grades of the Golden Dawn and taking your 5-6, that's going to change your life. So that's what I was talking about. So no, they're not related. Jebophil, for those who are listening and wonder what the heck that is the name in the angelical tongue for a kind of the central initiation ritual of the Enochian system. It's well, it's connected to everything, but don't think of it as part of the Heptarchia or the Watchtowers, which those are the most popular parts of the system. But what Jebophil is similar to is it's a system called counting the Omer in the Jewish tradition. And there's a certain time of year where you're supposed to meditate on the 50 gates of wisdom. And each day, and they do it by associating different prophets and not just prophets and biblical forefathers like Abraham, Moses, Isaac, and they associate them to the Sephirah on the Tree of Life, and you have to meditate on the biblical stories of these forefathers each day and the lessons that they had to teach through those stories. And as you work your way up through the 50 days, on the 50th day, you can only go through 49 gates, and then that 50th gate just parts a little bit, just enough for a little beam of God's light to shine out from heaven on you. No one can open it except I think it was Moses that went through the gate once, and Jesus went through the gate. And supposedly no one's supposed to open it again until the Messiah comes back. So that is essentially what D was basing Jebophil on. Instead of 50 gates of wisdom, there's 49 gates of understanding. So wisdom, understanding. He just, and again, you start. It's a 50-day process or 49-day, and you work your way up through each gate in the heavens, which are divided up into the 48 the 48 tables that are in the Book of Logan. And you work your way through each one of those gateways each day until you reach the highest one. And then again, you can't open it. It just kind of parts a little bit, and you'll get some kind of revelation or something, whatever God has for you in heaven that, and is waiting to give you,
get the download
you when you get up there. Yeah. So it's very life changing. It's very big. And that's how I was comparing them. But yeah, Abramelin's a whole different thing because there's no crowning in Jebophil. There's nothing like that. You can't really say what you're going to get when that gate part's at the top. That's personalized to you. But in Abramelin, you are literally taking an entity who technically exists above the fixed stars in the pleroma, or what the Kabbalah calls the Ein Sofor, and you're drawing it down and you're bonding it to your head, and it's a permanent ritual possession. So yeah, very, very different, very different results, very different ceremonies.
Yeah, it's interesting that the various manifestations of the Solomonic tradition, as I understand it, I don't think, I know we just talked about the natal angel being crowned, but I don't think there's a system like Abramelin in the Solomonic sense, or even in Enochian, for the teeny weeny bit that I know about Enochian. I don't think there's a system that's comparable to Abramelin. I don't think there's another system that focuses on like bringing an angel down and putting it in your head or putting it on your body and being permanently bound to that one angel, because it feels more like folk magic-y in the sense of you have 7 angels, 7 archangels. You're working with all 7 of them at different times. For the most part, you're doing that. It could be from some theurgy, but for the most part, you're doing it to manifest things in the world, in your life. but it's not so much about, what I understand from the Albemarle process. That you're transforming yourself in the way that you've been talking about. It sounds different, a very
Yeah,
different emphasis.
this is something that's kind of perplexed me for so long because you're absolutely right. Abramelin, in my view, is ancient. There is no culture that I have studied on this planet that does not have something that's analogous to it. From Ocha, um, there's a tradition to become a monk where they have to seal you like in a crypt for like 40 days or something. I mean, there's so many different traditions out there that amount to the same thing: sequestering yourself off, and like Jesus said, pray and don't stop praying until it comes down.
Something happens.
And
Right. Right.
that basic process is so ancient and so ubiquitous, and yet in the Western tradition, only Abramelin brings it up.
Right.
No other grimoire, not even Liber Geratus, which is one of the more spiritual grimoires. Only Abramelin goes this route, and it blows my mind.
Now I know I say that, but then I know on the demonic goetic side sometimes, and I'm thinking of some of Jake Kent's work too, who I know you reference frequently as well.
Yes,
Sometimes
highly
it
recommend.
looks like they want to kind of head in that direction. For example, what grimoire is that? Um, Grimoires like the Grimoire Verum and the red one, the Red Dragon.
The Red Dragon, yeah.
They don't talk about binding it to you per se, but just the idea that yeah, you have all these demonic entities that you can call and conjure, but there's one that's sort of like the psychopomp that you have to connect with first. And then once you do
Yep.
that, then you build your tools. And once you have your tools, then you start with this first one that kind of called all the rest. And that seemed like a
Bingo.
very
Yeah.
similar model to what I understand that Melon is without the Melon, but just the idea, as you taught, that you go through this long process, sequestering and so forth, purifying, 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 receive your angel, and then immediately you go about commanding the lower intelligences. We call them an SPD. You immediately go about, claiming authority over all these demons. And then you get to work with those demons in very specific ways. And like you said, you get familiars and all these different things. So I see elements of that in some of those demonic grimoires. Not all the way to Albermelon, but I see more of it there, at least in those
Yeah,
two.
I see it because I think what you're referring to, I think it is the Grand Grimoire. Skirlin, I think his name is,
Yes.
to
Uh-huh.
contact him. I think
And then
he's a
Lucifer's Rofocal, the other one that a
Lucifuge
lot of them.
Rofocal. Now a much lesser known one. Throughout the Grimoire, I just talked about this in one of my classes. Throughout the Grimoires, Uriel, the Archangel
Yes.
Uriel, appears as an intermediary. Even in the Enochian work, when Dee wanted to contact the angels, the first angel to appear to him, well, not the first was Anael, but that's a separate session. But the first Enochian scrying session, Uriel appeared
Uriel.
first. And he said, because Dee had been told that Michael was attached to the scrying stone. So he's like, well, where's Michael? And he said, Uriel said, well, all four of us archangels, the main archangels, are attached to your stone. And from that point on, he is the one that called in the other three archangels, Uriel. And he acted as the MC and the host of every single session. And whenever the men would screw up, he was the one that would pull the vision away and go,
Right.
and make, when the angels demanded that Kelly burn all of his goetic tools, that was Uriel that made, you're not getting another vision until he burns those tools. So Uriel was in charge. And I see that as very similar. That these are Elegua figures. These are
Right.
Now Uriel's a bit different, and I'll get to that. But a lot of these, like Skirlin, and there's other entities. Even in the Greek magical papyri, they call
Mm-hmm.
on Anubis, who and they call, sometimes on Osiris. But these are underworld entities.
Right.
Not Osiris, but Anubis especially. These are mercurial entities who know all the pathways, the secret pathways between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. So,
Right.
yeah, you have to contact them first and then they can bring you to the other spirits. And a lot of Westerners just try to do their spells by shouting them into the sky. But I mean, who's going to hear you? You know, you have to have
Right.
that connection. And as for the HGA, he's more like Uriel. I don't want to equate. I'm not saying I'm equating the HGA and Uriel, but in
But that
that
function, that function.
yeah, well, another kind of intermediary, at least in the Western tradition, is the solar one. You have mercurial ones and you have solar intermediaries. And the solar intermediaries, rather than being trickster deities who know how to get through all the back paths and stuff, the solar deities are royalty. They can go any damn where they want, walk into any realm, any mansion of heaven, because they own the place. And your guard, Uriel is like that. He's an archangel, and so he can go wherever he wants to go. And in the grimoires, he's associated with the sun, not the earth. So
Okay.
he's a solar angel.
Totally
So
too.
he brings the other angels, and the same with Osiris. He's a solar entity in the Greek magical papyri. So they might call him Anubis in this spell or Osiris in this one, but they're related to the underworld, and that's why they can open the gates. But that I've worked for years to try to bring the idea, the concept of the intermediary spirit back into Western occultism, because it got lost somewhere along the way, and it's so very important to have. You gotta know the doorman. You gotta know the gatekeeper, and if you know the
Yeah, and I
gatekeeper,
think,
they can take
and
the
I think
messages.
when you don't have a, I'll say, guardian angel, you know, I don't mean the lower guardian angel, but I mean any kind of head spirit. When you don't have that entity on your head, any of these things are very tricky because I have done stuff in other systems, sometimes even just experimentally, just to see if I have a connection with it, and that the energy of that entity in that system is really wild, and I can feel it. I can feel it right away. And I just told somebody this story as well, where there was a particular entity that I was conjuring for a very specific purpose, and it came, and then it tried to kind of cross some boundaries and cross some lines, and I immediately felt Chungo basically rise up in me and was like, "I wish you would." And I literally saw that.
I wish you
I
would.
literally saw that entity shrink back because I could see this whole thing playing out like in my vision, and I saw that entity like shrink back, like, "Oh, I'm not messing with you." And
Whoops.
he's like, "That's right. You're not going to mess
Yep.
with me. I'm going to put you down all the way." So if you don't have that, then the intermediary entity or spirit is very important because that's the thing that's going to do that. Because you're supposed to
Absolutely.
build the relationship with that entity first before you start diving into conjuring all the other demons or whatever, even angels. Sometimes angels are crazier than the demons. So,
Oh yeah, they're not friendly. People
right,
think
especially if you
angel
read
friendly,
those,
demon dangerous.
all
Ooh,
right,
no, no,
no,
no.
especially if you read those old Jewish grimoires, like the more Kabbalistic ones, like it's like, yeah, these
Merkava
angels,
angels.
yeah, these angels are, there's
Mm-hmm.
777 of them, and they lay waste to entire civilization. They're like, whoa, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you need that intermediary to kind of say, okay, everybody, wait a second. He's still training. He's still got his training wheels on. He's just trying to connect. Take it easy. No, you're not gonna cause him to go crazy. You're not gonna get in the head like that because I have the authority to hold you back.
Hold you back.
And then that intermediary will teach you, like, hey, Aaron, next
Don't
time
do
you do
that.
that, you need to take a stronger bath before you work with that entity. Take a stronger bath, light more candles, burn this kind of resin incense because you didn't do any of that and you just called it, and the energy is too crazy to be up on you like that. So you need to listen to what I'm telling you and do it if you want to have better results next time. And
Yeah.
that's what they're there for.
I've got more than one experience like that, I tell you. One of
Yeah, me
them,
too.
some of it's kind of flying out of my head now. Maybe Carrie remembers, but I do remember we went to a festival and we'd been invited to do a Solomonic ritual at the festival. And so I decided to do. Now, remember how I told you earlier on about the dangers of evoking the elementals? Well, I decided to do an evocation of the elementals, all four classes of them.
Lord have mercy.
And yeah, it was funny. Unrelated, but after the ritual, it was funny because we did the ritual, and then we were just kind of walking around the festival grounds after that, and this thick fog moved in, and everyone was like, where is this fog coming from? We're like, we know where it came from. We
Right.
know it's the sylph saying hi. And all people started having all sorts of weird elemental experiences around the festival, and half of them had no idea why because they hadn't been at the ritual. It was really
Right, right,
funny.
right.
But I am totally spacing what I did wrong. I did something wrong, and I can't remember what it was now. But I do know this: before I left for the this was at the time when I actually know to do that I would have done Abramelin beforehand regardless. So this wouldn't have been I did Abramelin a few days ago and now it's fine. I wanted to do a full Abramelin opening before I messed with the elementals. So I had to do Abramelin here at home, and then I went to the
Then
festival
go.
and did the ritual.
Right.
So we had a roommate at the time, so it was fine to leave a candle burning. I had a white novena candle burning on her altar and left it. So I left the altar open, went to the festival, did the work, had a good time, came home and discovered that the jar of the novena candle had shattered. White wax had poured all down the altar. And one thing I learned from Oshani, when things magically break, just shatter like that, that's because your spirits are clearing something,
Right.
something dangerous. And I asked her, I'm like, what WTF, and she told me that it was a mistake I had made. And I can't remember I'm sure I incorporated the lesson and it wouldn't make it again, but I just can't remember at the moment what it
And
was.
she
But it was a
broke it.
mistake.
Did she break the
She,
error?
she said that what I had done was going to harm me. And so she drew it like a lightning rod right onto that candle and it shattered the
Wow.
candle.
Wow.
So like if I had not had her, and maybe even if I hadn't thought to open up that altar before I left, then I don't know what would have happened to me.
Right.
She protected me. So yeah, that is
That's
so
awesome.
vital. So vital. The other
And
one,
I would say to people who are here tonight and who will watch this recording, if you ask for advice, and I know you didn't, but I would say to you that if you're working any kind of system like what we're talking about, not so much the head spirit system, but the system where like the Grand Grimoire, Grimoire Verum, like any system, or even the systems of Uriel, like the Armadale, which isn't very developed, but it's there. All the elements are there. If you're working a system like that, spend a lot of time with that intermediary spirit and really connecting and bonding with that spirit before you move on to the other stuff. Because of what
absolutely.
Aaron just said, that spirit is going to prevent a lot of mishaps, mistakes, and disasters, because they're primarily tasked with being the go-between between us and whoever those spirits are. So
Exactly.
that's definitely not the relationship you want to be weak. You want that to
Absolutely.
actually be stronger than the other spirits.
Because they're the ones that have your
So
back. And all the stuff
right,
we do in magic, whether it's your patron, head spirit, familiar spirits, your ancestor spirits, all of them. This is an army you're building.
right,
And every time you do magic, your magic works because they're behind you making it work. Your
right,
spell works because your guardian angel is standing there chanting the spell beside you. The spirits cower before you and go, yes, we'll do what you want, because your guardian angel is standing there behind you with a sword. Go and listen to what he says. And
right,
without these things, you're just going on your own. And you've heard me give this example before of Legion in the Bible. The Jewish exorcist went in there and said, we exorcise thee in the name of Paul and in the name of Abraham and in the name of Jesus, and because back then Jewish folks would invoke Jesus. And Legion said to them through the possessed man, yeah, Paul we know, Jesus we know, Abraham we know, but who are you? And they ripped the guy's clothes off and scratched
right,
him up,
right,
and they
right.
ran bleeding and naked out of the house. And then of course Jesus came along and just like, hey, you guys go into the pigs, get. And they went, yes sir. And they went.
Yeah, right.
And
Oh, we didn't know you were coming,
that's
right?
Exactly. That's the difference. Jesus didn't have to do the power of me compels you and all the
Right,
ritual
right,
and all that
right,
stuff. No, it's just like, hey guys, don't be in this guy, leave. And they begged him, can we go in the pigs? And he said, sure. And let him go in the pigs. So
yeah.
that's
Uh,
I always reference that story because it embodies what we're really talking about here. Is you have to have the spiritual authority, and the spiritual authority comes from this connection you have with these entities, your spiritual army. Because without them backing you, you are just another ape who's come to pester them for sex or money, and they're not interested in helping you
right,
if they hear
right.
you at all. So yeah,
So to the point you're making again on the ATR and the Orisha side, what I have seen along these lines is in these traditions, generally speaking, especially the Cuban ones, you start with ancestors or ancestral spirit guides. We call them Egun, kind of the catch-all phrase. We always start there,
yep,
in part because they're core to your development in the tradition. Like that's your foundation. But what I have literally seen happen, even at Santeria ceremonies, is the elders gather, everything kind of gets put together for whatever ceremony it is. And before the ceremony can officially start, the first thing you have to do is throw obi to Egun, meaning that you do divination to that person's ancestors and spirit guides to see if they get blessings for the ceremony about to take place. You do that before you do anything with Orisha, anything. That always has to happen first. I have been at ceremonies where the priests go to do that and they keep getting like no's, like one no after another, and they're sitting there like, what is going on? Why are we getting so many no's? And so usually when that happens to us, we know instead of like trying to force it, we kind of sit for a minute and kind of just open ourselves up to hear what the spirits had to say. And 9 times out of 10, they're giving all those no's because that person has not been doing the work with their ancestors and their spirit guides. And they'll say that. They'll say, you are so eager to receive your warriors in Orisha, you're so eager to receive them that you forgot all about us. And you forget that without us, you wouldn't even have the opportunity to receive those other spirits. We're actually more important than those Orishas. We're 10
you're
million times
literally the
more important than
foundation.
Orishas. Right. We're way more important than them. And there's a phrase that Santeros say, "Ikulo bi ocho," which basically means, there's no Orisha without the dead. That's kind of a quick and dirty translation. So I have seen ceremonies actually not be able to progress because a person got lazy or really, in some cases, I think sometimes, quite frankly, it's because their godparent does a poor job of teaching them, like, hey, I know you want the Orishas and all that, but you've got to be consistent with your ancestors. You've got to spend the time at your bovada. You got to say prayers. You got to treat your grandmother right. You got to
Right.
be doing all of that. It's not even just the ones that have died. It's also the ones that are about to become ancestors. That if you still have
That's a good point.
elderly elders in your family, you should be respecting them. So if you have problems with them, and I understand not every problem that we have in our families is our fault, right? But
Right.
sometimes there do need to be boundaries and stuff. So I understand that. But that aside, if there is an issue like that, like you really should be prioritizing your relationship with them because that's also part of the ancestor reverence, you know. And any of those things, any combination of those things can create problems with a person's development and ability to progress in the tradition, in any of the ATR traditions, because they will come and they will block and stop the ceremony cold. And even if you try to, I have seen only once that I can think of one time where the priest tried to kind of push it forward anyway. Like they did a light appeasement of the person's ancestors. And after they checked to see if they were okay, they were still getting funny letters. They were getting the kind of letters that let you know, like, something's still not right. And they proceeded to go forward with the ceremony. That ceremony had a bajillion different problems. a bajillion problems. Stuff got loose, stuff got lost, people got hurt, stuff that shouldn't be happening at a
Things fall
ceremony.
over. Yeah.
Yeah, things fall over, things break, you know. And I was like, wow, they really were not kidding. You know, because I watched this and I was like, wow, they really weren't kidding. So I got to make sure that doesn't happen to me. So kind of a different angle on it, but you know, in a sense, ancestors and ATRs are those intermediary spirits, along with Elagua or Lucero and Palo. You know, those two kind of go hand in hand. You know, the crossroads spirit and your person's ancestor, they're kind of neck and neck in terms of the importance of those two and how you have to have a regular practice of connecting and appeasing and just making sure everything's okay with those spirits before you try to do anything major. Like even me, if I'm making major life decisions, I have to go to my Elagua and talk to him about it. I can't just go, like I can't just move somewhere without talking to him. I can't.
Right.
It's not gonna turn out well for me because something's not gonna work right. And I'm gonna go to him and he's gonna be like, yeah, I know it's not working right because you didn't come to me.
I stopped you.
You forgot to do that. So I blocked you. So now because you did that and now you're here. So now you got to do this and this and this. And I want this sacrifice. I want this offering. You're like, oh my God, you know, and, you know, you feel it in your pocket. But that's what you got to do.
And on the same subject, but more on the positive side of it, what I tell people is that, because remember I said before, you have to have an entity that gives a damn about you, that knows you, that wants to help you. And so much of both of our traditions are based on that, the relationships you build. And where it comes to the ancestors, you're talking about an entire host of spirits who come prepackaged with a reason to give a damn about you. They come prepackaged with the same DNA you have, so they are ridiculously easier to contact than any other spirit. You know, so it's like, why wouldn't you start there? Why wouldn't you work magic there? They want to help you. They want you to succeed and be prosperous. And like I said, that spiritual army, you want those guys behind you and pushing forward. So yes, I mean, there's just so many reasons to work with them, you know, and so many reasons, you know, to avoid not working with. I mean, that's in your tradition, because my tradition doesn't really put a lot of stress on ancestors, because I think a lot of it came from after the religions of the book were trying to tamp down on that, but it's still in there, you know, like my four familiars. I remember when they started requesting a human skull. I wanted to get them a real human skull, but I told them they had to bring me the money. And until that happened, I found a nice decorative skull and I put it on their altar. And when I got the money came, and I was looking at human skulls that I could obtain. They said no, they wanted the ones that they had. They wanted to make.
right.
But that's a whole.
They were good.
That's them just being weird. But that's beside that. I'm digressing. But yeah, I went to. I'm spacing her name. She's gonna kill me. She's been a friend of mine for years. She does the New Orleans voodoo stuff.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, she's
written a lot of books.
Facebook. Yeah, she has, and she used to do the Hoodoo magazine that was really nice. But
she's written books on Marie Laveau too.
Yeah, I can't believe both of us are space. She's gonna kill both of us, you know that.
Denise Alvarado.
Yes, Denise. Sorry, Alvarado. Denise. I am so sorry. Like, she changed her name on Facebook, and it's hard now. It won't stick in my head. But Denise, wonderful lady. And yeah, I went to her back at that time, and I'm like, why the hell are my familiar spirit, my Abramelin familiar spirits, asking for a skull? And she was the one that was pointing out to me that even though, you know, Abramelin doesn't even mention the ancestors anywhere, that, you know, those four familiars, they're coming from that side. They're coming from the world of the dead.
Right.
You know, these are chthonic spirits. What's chthonic mean? Underworld. Right. So basically, that's a link to the ancestor realm right there. That, well, I say that. I have an altar to my four familiars, and that altar with that skull and other things that are on it is my link to the ancestor realm. Officially, as far as Abramelin is concerned. Now, Carrie has the Bovidas, that huge Bovida that you saw in the class I gave on Bovidas. That's hers. So most of what I know about Bovidas comes from her and Oshani. But yeah, so yeah, you'll find little references to the realm of the dead, the realm of the ancestors here and there through the grimoires, but you kind of
Right.
have to know what you're looking for to even spot them because they were so buried, so stamped down.
Yeah, there's even not a there's a some of the there's a handful of grimoires that have usually one necromantic graveyard ritual that pretty much looks the same across the grimoires. We usually
Pretty
take
similar.
Yeah, usually you go to a grave, you bring your black knife, um, you carve a circle kind of around that space somehow, and then you do other offerings and prayers and stuff, and kind of conjure that dead person.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize this, but the art of conjuring spirits is called exorcism.
Right.
Like functionally speaking, there is no difference between like if you use the go, like say the Goetia. It's not my favorite grimoire, but everyone knows it, so I'll say Goetia. And you use the ritual in the Goetia to summon, say, oh, I don't know, Beelzebub or Ashtaroth. Functionally, there is no difference between that and going to a graveyard and doing the same thing there to summon
Right.
Uncle Pete. It
Right.
is
Right. Right.
literally
Right.
the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and again, that is another place in the grimoires where ancestor work kind of peeks through a little bit. Like
Mm-hmm.
even in the grimoires, there are certain spirits who, because it lists what powers they have, all the spirits have in the Goetia, and there are certain ones of them that for some reason have powers over graves.
Yeah.
Like one will,
Murmur and Boone.
yeah, one
Murmur and Boone
lights.
are the
I
two that I remember.
I think Bune is the one that switches bodies in graves. And
Yes.
so the other one must be the one who will light fires over graves. And they're very odd powers for spirits to have, but
What do you think that
for
is? What do you think? What do you think they're talking like the lighting fires? What do you think that is?
I I don't have a damn clue, but I think Jake had an idea that the lighting fires over graves may have been a spell to find lost graves.
Mm.
Um, as far as switching bodies in graves, I don't know. But the only thing I can say is just a generalized answer that a lot of that stuff does go the further back you go, and the more the exorcism rituals that are aimed at demons become necromancy rituals aimed
Right.
at the dead. And necromancy rituals aimed at the dead, if you trace those back far enough, you're going to hit ancestor worship.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's a connected line. And so like even in the Solomonic system, I say it never mentions ancestor worship, but Saturn, you're told that if you do want to work with your ancestors, you do it through the planet Saturn. And
Right.
sure enough, if
Makes
you look
sense.
at my Saturn altar, what do I have all over my Saturn altar? I've got skulls. I never dust it, so I let it get dusty. It's very much of the grave. Is
Right.
what my Saturn
Right.
altar is. So both my familiar altar and my Cassiel, Archangel of Saturn altar, are both links to the ancestor realm, even though my traditions don't specifically have you set up a bovida or do any of that. They're still there,
Right.
and
Right.
they do come through sometimes. My wife has
Yep.
actually seen my grandma come through a couple of times and
Wow. Well,
check the
that's
place
awesome.
out. And yeah, so yeah, they're there. They're
Mhm.
there.
Very cool. Well,
Let's see.
um,
We should
I don't
probably.
know.
It's getting pretty late, especially.
Yeah.
Oh no,
I'm
you're
wrap up.
earlier than me, so it's about
I know it's
midnight
late.
here. We
It's
should
late where
probably
you are. Yeah.
start winding down for these poor folks. But I just wanted to see if we had any other questions. I see one from Alexi again. Follow up question: which course
Which
from
course
either
from
of
either
your modalities would
the
possibly be a good next step for me to take? Oh, that
take?
I don't think we can answer that here, brother, because we don't know exactly where you are.
Yeah, we didn't
But
talk about this that so much tonight. Maybe this will be for another time. But I think
yeah,
talking about what we as suggest or advise people to do to kind of figure out their path, their spiritual path, in occultism or
that's a
whatever.
tough one,
And
but it would be a good
it is,
topic.
um, and there's no one answer to that. But
No,
we
all
kind of
depends on your
need to
calling.
know more about you to be able to really, really say that because like right away, I could say, well, take my intro to hoodoo courses, and then Aaron could say, take my intro to Solomonic magic
or the
course,
Abramelin
and
course or
that,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that any of those intro courses gives you a good feel for the foundational stuff that we teach. Um, but again, it really depends on the kind of magical person you want to be. You know, do you want to be working with angels? Do you want to be
Yeah.
doing a practice that's more like American folk magic? You know, do you want to do practices that are more theurgically inclined, or do you want to do practice that are more about practical magic and making, like, I don't literally mean it, but like getting laid and making lots of money, like, do you want
Right.
that kind of, you know, emphasis instead? And there's no wrong answers, because
No.
we're all different. Like, I'm somewhere between those two things. I want some ability to make things happen in my life, but I don't want everything to be about the pursuit of material stuff, because that feels very out of balance to me, and we can't take any of it with us anyway. So I don't even want the majority of my life energy centering around something like that.
The
So,
next time we do this, you and I should talk about eschatology in our traditions and
uh,
the focus on preparing ourselves for what's going to happen when we pass. That's a big
right,
one that doesn't get
it
talked
is.
about a lot.
I
But as
feel
for
like
Lexi,
my,
I would
yep,
want to know, because I talk to my students a lot about this. They want to know which way to go, and I have to talk to you for a while and get a sense of what you're
right,
into, what
yeah,
calls to you. You may be the kind of guy who would do better in a lodge like a Golden Dawn kind of system, or you might be someone who just needs to use a folk tradition like hoodoo, or you might. I've even I have even directed people toward Thelema, and if I think that fits their personality, I'll tell them to go look into Crowley's stuff. Um, I try not to do that, but I have done it. So yeah, it's very personal. And just for you, Alexia, I would like to know what you're doing. What system are you practicing that you're getting that feeling? Because whatever that is should probably be what you continue to do and
yeah,
push forward in that
absolutely.
because that's what's having the visceral effect on you. Abramelin did that for me, and you had that happen, and I don't know where that
Because
happened.
because because every conversely, everything doesn't do that for me. So for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
I somebody wrote a book recently about the fetch, and it's something that I'm curious about. So I read the book, and I was starting to read through it, and I was like, this is interesting. This is interesting. Is this something I should do? And I got about halfway through the book, and I was like, nope. Nope. And I actually heard some spirits that I have that are fetch like, and they're looking at me like, and why are you even looking at that? Because you have us. And I'm like, all right, I got it. I got it. So,
I
you
think my
know,
familiars would be the same. I was like, "What are you doing?
yeah, like,
You
why?
already don't
Why?
pay us enough attention."
Right, right,
you
right,
know,
right, right, right.
and that's
So
another good point.
so
Oh
so
no,
part
no, go
of
ahead and
part
finish.
of figuring your path out is you can experiment or try other things, but you got to be careful, because I know people who do that and they don't have the foundation under their feet yet, and they're kind of all over the place. So it's very easy to become quickly diffused. But what should happen is, when you have that foundation, you should be able to go as far and wide as you want, but you will always have this thing kind of pulling you back to the center. Like, okay, that's enough. Come back over this way. You're going too far with that. That's not really meant for you like that, like it is for other people. Come back over here. I literally have my spirit tell me that, and I listen to it,
Mm.
because they want me to learn about multiple systems, because I'm a reader, I'm a diviner, and even Aaron, you said this, that the more we know about other systems, our spirits also learn those things through us. So when people are coming to us for divination, now when a Thelemite comes to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I know a little bit about that. This part is kind of weird, but yeah, I could see that you got on that path, but that's really not meant for you. You should be a Golden Dawn initiate instead. And here's why. Here's what my spirits are telling me based on my knowledge of the Golden Dawn. So yeah, but it's a
And
it's a hard that's a hard question to answer completely.
yeah, at least without private consultation. But I think you really nailed what I was about to say too. Is that don't don't be so quick to experiment with everything. Don't be all over the place. You've got to narrow yourself down. And a lot of students have this problem. They want to study and practice everything, but you got to narrow yourself down and pick what you want to follow and then follow it all the way.
Right.
Rather than trying to be eclectic and doing basically you can end up becoming, they say jack of all trades, but a master of none. And a lot of people do that in magic. I just had to tell my students in class last night because they started asking me, well, have you worked with these angels? Have you tried this talisman? Have you just like, guys, no, I don't do these things out of curiosity. I do things out of necessity. And um, don't use this is more advanced than getting started, but even once you get advanced, don't be one of these people that treats the grimoires like ordering menus. It's like, okay, well, I need this done, so let me see which spirit. Oh, okay, now today I'm gonna summon Beelzebub, and then well,
Right.
today I'm
Right.
gonna
Right.
summon
Right.
Uriel. Like, no, find you could work with just one spirit for your entire life and be an extremely powerful magician.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I've got my guardian angel. Most things I do through her. If I need to, I can go to my familiars. I've got them, and anything else is pretty much covered by the 7 archangel altars. I can go to any one of them, and that's it. I don't.
Right.
I'm not trying to collect things. I'm not trying to collect angels. I'm not trying to
Right.
collect every single grimoire, and I've tried every grimoire. I'll study them all, but I have base grimoires. Those are the ones. Abramelin. That's my base. I did that one all the way through and then some. The Enochian system, I'm doing that all the way through and then some. Golden Dawn, same thing. But each one I do all the way through without trying to go to, trying to bring in a million different unrelated things and make a big eclectic system. And then I don't know what I want to practice or where I want to go. It's dedicate, narrow your focus, and then you'll start to make progress. It's kind of why I don't like chaos magic, because they talk about just changing paradigms. Well, today I'm going to have this paradigm, and tomorrow I'm going to have this paradigm.
Right.
And I always tell them, I said, and they'll tell me, they'll go, well, I understand Solomonic magic. I practiced that paradigm for a few months. And it's like, no, because how can you ever know what it feels like to have practiced that system for 20 years?
Right.
You'll never know that.
Right.
And if you'll never know that, then how are you an adept of that system? So focus and dedicate and work it with all your heart and whatever your system is. It doesn't matter which one it is. It could be Wicca, it could be Thelema, Golden Dawn, Solomonic, Abramelin, doesn't matter, ATR traditions, but you got to put your whole heart and soul into it and work it all the way through. And that's the secret.
Well, and to your point of what you're saying, in some of the folk Latin angelic traditions, for lack of a better way of generalizing it, one of the things that I was taught is, and you even kind of say this differently, but you say it, that you could work with Archangel Michael, right? And just have a devotion to him and only him.
Yep.
And then what they do in that tradition is if they need to, and especially Michael, right? It's not the greatest example because he has a connection to the dead, but if you need to connect to the dead, instead of going to Cassio, you stay with Michael, but you work with him on Saturday. And you kind of flip his stuff into a Saturnian current. So now your Michael is like a Saturnian Michael that has a much stronger vibration during that time you're working with the kind of turning energy of pulling and limitation and really pulling whatever spirit of the dead you're working with, on top of the fact that it's Archangel Michael, who doesn't even need to be worked with on the Saturday because he has access to the dead.
Yeah, he does
already.
And honestly,
right.
I would use that same example, but say go to the Mercury Michael instead of the Solar Michael, because the Mercury Michael, he's the psychopomp. He's the one that knows
Right.
the paths back and
Right.
forth. So yeah, still a perfect example, but I would
I would say
go to Mercury.
Yeah, so people to understand, and this is again to your point of like, you're not going to figure this out in 6 months. This comes from decades of practice where you experiment and say, okay, what's going to happen when I work with Michael on a Saturday? what's going to happen to that energy? How am I going to experience it different? What's going to happen when I work with him on Tuesday on the day of war for some spiritual attack that I need to do to defend myself? How is he going to manifest differently in the Martian current? Right. And so then you very quickly understand, oh, I don't need all the other angels like Dollar Angel. I have him. And matter of fact, he also could probably even call that other angel like Cassiel. He could probably call Cassiel and they work together.
Because you would go to Michael and you would say, rather than just experimenting, you'd go to Michael and just say, okay, now teach me how to work with the dead. And then he would start telling you, okay, well, you need to put this and this on my altar,
and there you go,
symbols, and he would tell you how. And then he would, again, they teach you the magic. They tell you how to do it. And if you any spell they give you, you follow that spell, and it is going to work.
Yes, sir.
I can't believe it. I think we're the only two left in the chat.
That's all right. That's
Everyone else bailed at midnight. I think they all turned into pumpkins.
Right. But people will be able to watch this, and
they'll be watching.
So please, reach out to either one of us. We're both on social media all the time, on Facebook and things. And if you have any questions after you see this, just look us up.
Let us know, and we will be doing this again because I love having these discussions.
Me too. Talk
about
fun.
Things that never get talked about but need to be talked about. So
absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
You too, man.
All right. Catch you on Facebook.
Sounds good, man. Bye.